G'day guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Wildkard. You are here because you are a great fan of rugby. You are here because it's Wednesday, and you are here because it's time to read some rugby news. First up, Rugby World Rankings Round 4 of Six Nations happened on the weekend, and it turns out Wales simply moved up above Japan after beating Italy, and everybody else is unchanged. Unchanged from 1 to 8. Yeah, Rugby World Rankings for you this week. Next up, obviously, Six Nations, like I mentioned, the big game of the week, England versus France. England suffered the biggest loss at home ever to France, and this was the third biggest margin in the history of England rugby, 10 points to 53. This was a complete blowout. It was like watching professional players playing against amateurs, and not a good day for an English fan, but Sir Clive Woodward is the gift that keeps giving for all of us as rugby fans. We know, as the England coach, you need to get Sir Clive Woodward to approve your selections. Otherwise, you're going to get slammed on the Sunday Telegraph. Even if you win the game, you'll still get slammed. And Sir Clive Woodward this week had a few interesting things to say, right? He's so smart, he literally contradicts himself, okay? In the same week. I know. It's just, it's comical how this guy writes things in the media, right? So first up, he basically came out earlier in the week saying that, hey, Borthwick, you better be selecting a 10 going to the Rugby World Cup. You back a 10 and you stick to him, right? And my suggestion is that you select Owen Farrell because, and I quote, because Marcus Smith has too late to develop him. He wasn't given, basically too late, right? And I'm going to quote exactly what he said here. 12 to 18 months ago, I called for Smith to start so he could get the time he needed ahead of the Rugby World Cup. Now, that time has lost. It was wasted by the previous regime, right? So you can't start Marcus anymore. You got to start Owen Farrell. Okay, just a couple of things here. First of all, I went back and checked. 12 months ago, Marcus Smith was starting for England. He was given time 12 months ago in the Six Nations, February 2022, to prepare him for the Rugby World Cup. So it's absolutely not true that he wasn't given the time. And in fact, 18 months ago, in July in 2021, he debuted for England. So yeah, he debuted as the starting 10 in the July Test series. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he played against what do you call it? Played against I think it was Argentina. Yeah, he definitely played. Definitely was given time 18 months ago and 12 months ago. So I don't know what Sir Woodward is talking about, but that's not the thing, right? So he's backed Owen Farrell to be, the 10, the premier number 10 going to Rugby World Cup. And then Borthwick announced Marcus Smith to be starting ahead of Owen, and Woodward praises the selection of axing Owen Farrell, right? Like literally a few days later, he contradicts his own statements a few days earlier by saying that this is the right decision. I kid you not, right? It's just, and it's just absurd how this guy, has a job as a pundit. He literally contradicted himself, right? A few days later. And more importantly, after the match, England was, absolutely dominated, right? Sir Clive Woodward actually came out on television, live on TV, stated that, what did he say? Stated that it's not that big of a gap between the two teams, right? I saw this on live TV. I couldn't believe that he was talking about this test match. I thought I was watching a clip from another post-match interview from another game. Not that big of a gap. It's not that big of a gap. From Sir Clive Woodward. Surely, did he watch the Wales and Italy game beforehand and thought he was commentating on that match? Because yeah, that you can say that's not a big gap, okay? But I mean, this is literally as big as you can possibly get. between the two teams in England, right? So there were some England heavy defeats. Obviously, the biggest defeat in the history of England is under Sir Clive Woodward to Australia in 1998. So yeah, that was 76 points to nil, losing to the Wallabies. But that was like a, bench slash B team on the field that day. But yeah, still, it is what it is. Sir Clive Woodward seems to have a really bad memory of big defeats. Now there's some, Steve Bothwick now has stuck with, some of the best, some of the worst stats of England rugby history. So obviously, he's currently obviously the head coach for the biggest defeat of England rugby at home. He was also previously the captain for England. The previous biggest match, losing score at home, where he was the captain. So he's now involved in the top two biggest losing test matches of England's history. One as the coach, one as the captain. So yeah, Bothwick is really stuck in a bad spot. Coming out of this game as well, big injuries out of England. Ollie Lawrence, the centre, is out with a hamstring injury. As a result, Guy Porter has been called in. Amalo Tuilangi is likely going to be available following his suspension in the Sales Sharks. So England do have availabilities, but Ollie Lawrence will have to be making some changes. Speaking of change, Jack Noel, who's left out of England's squad completely, is reported to be going to La Rochelle. And finally, there was a lot of talk about England rugby not being physical, like Don Brum not really fronting up the tight forwards, not fronting up in physicality. And one of the players that was being talked about over the week after the loss was Billy Vunipola, a guy that brings a lot of physicality, a lot of dominance up front, and he's been left out in England's squad. And according to to some speculations in the rugby pod, what's his name? Andy Good. Anyway, it was speculated that there's some personal issues between Billy and Bothwick in the past, which is why Billy is not selected in the England team. So yeah, there's some interesting speculations there. But again, the England squad has been announced going to play Ireland this weekend, and Billy Vunipola is not part of the squad. Yeah, so anyway, moving on. The first test match of the week is Italy versus Wales. 17 points to 21 went down. So this was a really difficult match for me to watch. I really felt Italians could have been closer. Wales was leading 22 points to 3 at halftime. It looked like the game was already out of reach for Italy. Second half, Italy did make a little bit of a comeback, but it was just, wasn't quite enough gas to get the Italians there for a complete turnaround. But after the game, Kieran Crowley, the head coach, had a few things to say about the referee. So at halftime, he was captured on camera that he was yelling at least talking to the referee from the sideline. He was not happy about something, and after the game, he really came out in the media and just criticized the referee for a few things. One of them is that he thinks that there should have been a penalty try for Italy after the Wales illegally tackled one of their players near the try line from offside position, and also he felt like the Welsh should have got a yellow card anyway for repeatedly giving away penalties inside their own half. He literally said like the Welsh giving away 16 penalties and never getting a yellow card. He thought that was just absurd. And also he kind of really talked about how he didn't care about the process anymore because, it's just not, you can sense the frustration that he was getting at. Kind of similar to what Rassi Erasmus was talking about, where the referee can't just come out and say, hey guys, sorry, we made a mistake. After like 2 or 3 days after the game, it's if you were to follow the process to pull the complaints through the World Rugby, it's basically like really slow, and then they're just gonna say, sorry, we made a mistake, let's move on. So that he didn't think that's good enough, so he really wanted to air it publicly this time. So he's probably gonna get a fine, I think, for this. But we shall see how that's gonna carry out. He also talked about the Wales game being very kicking heavy, and something that he wants to avoid for the Italian game essentially. But yeah, he was noticeably extremely salty about the referee after the game. So yeah, he could be looking into he could be looking at a big fine for what he's done. So he was yelling at the referee at halftime, and also the comments after the game would we'll see him probably cop a fine. Anyway, Wales has confirmed a 32-man squad going into playing the last game of the round against France. Not sure what the chances of Wales upsetting France in France, but they had a few injuries as well going to this game. Liam Williams is out. Liam Williams is out due to a shoulder injury. Baldwin is out due to a pec injury, and Sam Parry and Kieran Williams are called into are released also for groin injuries. So yeah, I think Liam Williams is probably the biggest loss for Wales, but they do have halfpenny covering, so it's not that big of a deal, I think. So they also had Chris Twinza, the lock, that's being released, and Teddy Williams also released by Warren Gatland. So yeah, Wales heading to France. Don't think that's gonna be an upset in the making then. Finally, the last game of the weekend for Six Nations, Scotland down by Ireland 7 points to 12. Like I said, the Irish team was superb once again, especially in the second half. I thought the first half, Scotland really took a step up in their typical, performances. I know what they were holding on to the Irish onslaught, and they actually scored the first try of the game. So halftime score was 7 points to 8, and very, very close for Scotland. But second half, the Irish team, despite suffering 5 injuries, was able to, take out Scotland. And I think Gibson Parks returning from injury really gave the Irish team that speed that they needed in the second half to put Scotland away. This is a really tough game, I guess. A tough game for Scottish team, more clinical. I actually didn't think that the clinicalness was the issue for the Scottish team. I thought like the consistency, the physicality in the second half was just really starting to drop off. Like they just couldn't hold on to the same pace that they played in the first half. Scottish team had a couple of injuries as well. Stuart Hogg and Finn Russell both suffering a couple of injuries. Stuart Hogg an ankle injury, and Finn Russell with a knee ligament. Hopefully he's going to be okay, because that sounds like a really bad injury, a knee ligament. That could see him out for a long time if it's a really serious one. So hopefully they're not going to be that bad, and they'll be able to return soon to play in the Rugby World Cup. And finally, obviously, Ireland, absolutely immense performance to beat the Scottish team in the second half. A really, really, really guts, played against a lot of adversity. So yeah, like we mentioned, there was 5 injuries out of this game for the Scottish team. Gary Ringrose had a head knock and knocked himself out in a tackle in the second half, so he's out this weekend against England. Ian Henderson also was out due to a fractured forearm. Dan Sheehan, Roland Keller both out due to shoulder injuries, 2 hookers. And finally, Caelan Doris has a bit of a hip injury, but he will probably be okay after the game. So he's the one person that's most likely could still be playing this weekend. So yeah, 5 injuries for Ireland. Most of them in the 4-pack, especially in the hooker position. So Ireland could have a little bit of a issue there in terms of lineouts against England. Yeah. Finally, there was a bit of an interesting thing happen in the Ireland match. So there was an issue where there was early in the game where Scotland did a quick throw in the lineout, and the throw kind of went awry, and Ireland kind of recovered the ball and then went in for a try essentially. So that try was disallowed because apparently the ball that was used was a different ball. So the rule for a quick throw is that you must use the same ball to do the quick throw. So a lot of people are saying like, oh, it's Scotland's fault for doing the quick throw. It's not Ireland's fault. But in technical terms, if you don't use the correct ball to do the quick throw, it's actually like a void. And it's like, it's like, does it count if if instead of a rugby ball they're throwing in, if they're throwing in a soccer ball, does that count? No, it doesn't, because it's not the legal ball that is allowed to play to make the play. So it kind of like, that's kind of like how I see it. But that is the decision on the field. However, after the match, there was some referees pointing out that if it's a quick throw, then that is not a legal throw. But there were enough people in the 5-meter channel. This was a 5-meter line out for the Scottish team. There wasn't enough people in the 5-meter channel for this to be considered a normal line out. So there was basically um um so yeah, this was basically, some people basically could see this as like a proper line out, and then you will just throw them quickly. So the question basically becomes whether this is a quick throw or whether this was a line out thrown quickly, because we see teams do this as well. Like teams will like people were still like walking in, and then a team just quickly throws the ball to the hooker, to the prop up front to get the game going, right? And then that's completely illegal. So it's whether it's a quick throw of the line out, or is that or whether it's whether line out has already been set, or it's a quick throw before the line out has been set. So there were people arguing that this was a quick throw while the line out has already been set. So then this should have been illegal and should have been a try for Ireland. But yeah, it is what it is. It's up for people to discuss, and that's the referee decision. Anyway, let's move on to Super Rugby of the week now. So Super Rugby round 3, we had first game of the week, Chiefs versus Highlanders. Convincingly beat the Highlanders once again. Again, the Chiefs with David McKenzie back just really look like a really like a really tier 1 team. Like everything looks so smooth, so polished, and Highlanders once again really didn't look like they had anything going for the game and just got absolutely demolished by the Chiefs, you could say. And then second game of the week was the Waratahs versus the Rebels on Friday night. This game was a huge upset, I thought, for the Waratahs. The Rebels came out stronger than the Waratahs, more clinical than Waratahs, stayed ahead from half time. And the second half, it looked like the Rebels wasn't going to choke like they always do. Waratahs was making a comeback, but the Rebels was able to stamp it out and really close out the game strong. 34 points to 27. This is a big kind of upset. The Rebels actually look quite good this year so far after the first 3 rounds, especially beating the Waratahs this weekend. And yeah, the Rebels really starting to click a little bit. The backline look quite smooth. They don't do anything that's too fancy, just the basic stuff really well. And then more importantly, I do think that the Rebels forward pack is stepping up and really putting on the hard yards up front to set up the platforms for the back line. So the Rebels are a team to watch out for this week. This year in Super Rugby for some potential upsets. Next up, we had the biggest upset, I guess, in the Super Rugby history. The Fijian Drua grinded out a huge win over the Crusaders. Razor Robertson has failed the Crusaders this week on the weekend for putting on a team that was second tier, where he thought he was too arrogant and too busy thinking about becoming the All Blacks head coach next year to really care about this game, I guess. And then the Crusaders, really didn't have anything going. It was really poor for the Crusaders. The only thing the Crusaders were able to consistently strike points was the rolling maul, right? And in fact, the Endurers only conceded, abysmal amount of penalties, right? So 9 penalties conceded, 3 more tries. So 1 out of 3 penalties were converted into a more try for the Crusaders. That's about as low as you can get for a team to manage that penalty try up the more, right? And that's basically the difference between the two teams. The Crusaders had better more, and the Fijian Drua were just had to play the rugby, play what they were good at, the Fijian style rugby, to try to get themselves a win. And eventually the Crusaders give away a penalty in the dying minutes, and Fijian Drua, Rob Valentini's brother, kicked the goal to win the game 25 points to 24. Huge win for the Enduras. And Crusaders, really letting themselves down a bit with the selections, and Razor probably should focus more on his Super Rugby team before celebrating his selections for the All Black coach. And then finally on Friday, later on the same Saturday afternoon, the Hurricanes lost to the Blues 19 points to 25. I thought the Blues basically had the game in control. Since basically it was firmly controlled in the first half. The Hurricanes was up to the Hurricanes to make a comeback. They did make a comeback early in the second half, and then they kind of just lost steam a little bit, and the game kind of stalled out where the Blues were able to just cruise home for the win, essentially. 25 points to 19 was the final score, and it is what it is. And I don't know what else to say about this match. Finally, we got 2 more matches to go for the Super Rugby. We've got Reds versus Brumbies. Again, the Brumbies I mean, the Reds' performance was much better. The Brumbies is considered like the premier team in Super Rugby in Australian side, but the Reds was able to score 3 tries against Brumbies. The goal kicking was a little bit lacking, but the Brumbies, like I said, the penalty milkers always milk penalties, was able to win the game via essentially a penalty difference. I don't know what else to say about this game as well, but it's just it is what it is. The Brumbies had a better game management than the Wallabies. Sorry, not the Wallabies, than the Reds. But I do think that the Reds played overall better rugby than the Brumbies, more attacking, more entertaining rugby than the Brumbies in this match. Finally, the final game of the week was the Western First. It was Moana Pacifica. This game almost went to super time, and Western Force was in a lot of trouble as well if they went to super time. So the two teams was quite close. Moana Pacifica scored a try immediately off the bat, and then the Moana Pacifica was up ahead with the Western Force slowly chipping back, getting himself back in the game with penalty goals, and then Moana scores again at 24 minutes, and the Western Force, catches up just before half time, and then finally in the second half, Western Force scores a try, and then Moana Pacifica kind of like levels the game with penalties, and then the game was tied at 18 points apiece. There was a bunch of yellow cards given out of this game, and then I think the Western Force had a yellow card in the final 10 minutes. So basically, if this went 2 yellow cards, I think it was. Basically, if there has gone to golden points, then the Western Force was in a really big disadvantage because they had players in the bin. So then, basically, in the final minute, the last minute of the game, Western in extra time, basically not in extra time, in red, the clock's running over 80 minutes. Western Force was able to get a penalty and kicked himself the winning goal, 21 points to 18, to avoid the golden points period and secure themselves the ruin. So we're going to talk about this. The big win was Honduras over the Crusaders. This was also Scotty Barrett's 100th Test Super match, rugby match. It is what it is. And obviously the New Zealand Rugby has made the blunder of announcing that they're going to be confirming a new All Blacks coach within the next 4 to 6 weeks. I guess 3 to 5 weeks, because it was announced last week. Obviously, Joe Schmidt is currently working side by side with Ian Foster. There were speculations that he was one of the running guys to take over as All Blacks head coach. Imagine how awkward that's going to be if Joe Schmidt is announced to be the next head coach whilst being assistant to Ian Foster. Yeah, that's the situation the All Blacks has put Ian Foster in. That's the situation the All Blacks has put New Zealand Rugby, rather, not the All Blacks. New Zealand Rugby has put with Joe Schmidt. So Joe Schmidt basically came out and officially announced that he's not going to be running for the head coaching role for the All Blacks next year at all. He will be focusing on assisting Ian Foster going into this Rugby World Cup, which is something that he should be doing, and this is the right thing for him to do. To not come out and say, "Hey guys, I'm fancy to take over the job if we don't win the Rugby World Cup," right? Like, it's really, really awkward position New Zealand Rugby has put it in. Anyway, final big bits of news now. Eddie Jones was at Super Round 2 weeks ago, and he was drafting a Wallaby squad on his notepad, and this notepad was taken photo of one of the fans, and that was leaked to the media. And Eddie Jones came out and was like, "Yeah, good on you, mate, for leaking that. Did a good job, but it's just the draft. I've got other people to think about coming into going into the Wallaby selection, so it's not confirmed." Rugby Australia also responded to World Rugby this week that they will be looking at introducing the drop-in of tackle height like England Rugby did, from shoulder height down to sternum at the community level. So we'll just see how that goes. And then finally in Australia, Cameron Murray was talked about by Eddie Jones to be a person that he wants to be targeted to bring into the Wallabies. So this obviously elicited a response by the South Sydney Rabbitohs CEO Blake Solly to say that, hey, you have basically telling the World Rugby Australia to manage their own house, and basically calling out Rugby Australia for fouling their own developmentals, as a resulting into trying to poach rugby league stars. So Springboks had a training camp on the weekend, added 8 new players into the alignment camp. So Springboks do this a lot. They do these alignment camps going into every season, just to get people from both overseas and domestically together to see who's available and mash them together for a bit of training sessions. So they've done that over the week. And finally, more of the Springboks. So Nigel Owens is still trying to decide. He was contacted by Rassie Erasmus to become assistant coach, no, assistant referee coach, I guess, for the Springboks. So basically, his role was going to be involving, during the Springboks training, he will be acting as the referee and pointing out the penalties or the issues of each of the players during training sessions. So he's been offered this role by Rassie Erasmus last week. Rassie called him, and basically, Nigel Owens has yet to decide what he wants to do. He's juggling a lot with his personal life, and since he kind of felt like since he retired as a referee, he didn't want to do this again. So he's also kind of like allured by the opportunity to go in the Rugby World Cup. So yeah, he hasn't made a decision yet, but we will see whether or not he's going to join the Springboks. If he does, it's going to be a pretty big boost to the Springboks campaign going to Rugby World Cup. Anyway, that's the news this week, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later this week for the team announcements and the reviews on the weekend. Cheers.